Hi everyone, I'm Scott McClure, your host of Wheat Speak with Westbred Wheat. In this new series, we'll be answering your audience-submitted wheat questions. We bring in industry-leading experts to provide you the most current research and timely information to help maximize your yield potential. Today's episode will discuss managing nutrients in season. Our guests today are from the Southern and Central regions. John Fenderson, Westbred Technical Product Manager for the Southern region.
Good morning, Scott.
Also joining us is our guest speaker, Brian Arnall, who is an associate professor at Oklahoma State University.
Thanks, Scott.
Brian, throughout the season, how can I determine how much nitrogen my wheat will need?
So yield goals are a good base level of determining total nitrogen recommendation. If we're discussing in-season application, you can look at what you've gotten down as your pre-plant and subtract that from your yield goal. And of course, if you have any pre-plant soil tests that you can use to guide that.
Well, one thing that I would recommend that growers do is certainly set a realistic yield goal. They certainly have a history on their farm of yields over time. As Brian mentioned, the first thing is to understand what you've already got in the soil and understand what your requirements are.
One thing that we do at Oklahoma State University that's been very successful is using the technology of the Enrich strip application with a handheld sensor to get a nitrogen rate. Research has shown up at Kansas that the yield goal nitrogen recommendation is plus or minus about 25 pounds of nitrogen from optimum rate.
One thing that I would make a comment on, depending on what state you're in, there are different levels of nitrogen requirements in particular that each state recommends per bushel of production. So you need to check with your local state extension soils people and find out what their recommendation is for pounds of nitrogen per bushel in that state.
Thanks, John. Once growers determine their nutrient needs, how can they manage these needs in season?
If you've got little growth on that wheat as we come into the green up period in the spring, we may want to think about putting a little more nitrogen out there to try to drive some spring tillering. If we've got adequate tillering, then maybe we can wait a little later in the season to apply that nitrogen closer to the reproductive stage so we can get better utilization of it. As far as the form of nitrogen you use, the key thing is to get it out there on time and in the right place and make sure that we get it into the soil where the plant can utilize it.
John makes some great points with that. One thing about timing is that as far as anything goes, most of our fertilizers have urea in them that we're going to be using for top dress or in season. If we're not putting them in the ground, we need to make sure, if possible, to get it on in front of a rain. That really reduces the probability of nitrogen loss.
So, when it comes to timing of nitrogen applications, what are your thoughts on split applications, Brian?
Split application nitrogen is really good as it puts on the nitrogen when the plant needs it. It doesn't use much going into winter dormancy, and the uptake curve really kicks up as we get into stem elongation and joining. It also allows you to make adjustments at that top dress time, looking back over what happened in the winter or the fall. If you had good winter fall, you can increase. If it's been a poor establishment and not enough rain, you can decrease that in-season nitrogen.
Thanks, Brian. John, what are you hearing from growers about nitrogen application?
Growers are wanting to know because they don't want to make more trips than they need to across the field and they don't want to pay for extra application. If they're only going to apply nitrogen one time during the season, Brian, what timing would you recommend as the most beneficial timing for them from a yield and a protein standpoint?
For me, that one timing is as close to hollow stem as we can get. If we got a lot of growth, then it'll be earlier at spring green up, or if we're needing growth because of late planted. But honestly, the closer we can get it on to that time where peak uptake happens, which is right after joining and hollow stem, is the time that the crop needs it the most, and that typically translates to the most yield and the most protein. So, John, what do you think about late nitrogen applications after heading to improve wheat protein?
Yeah, Brian, late season application can certainly give us a boost in grain protein in wheat. It's not 100% though. It's probably more of a 50-50 proposition. So it's not always going to pay you back in protein, but you do have an opportunity to raise the protein with those late season applications.
Thank you, John and Brian, for all of your insight. Make sure to continue submitting questions at westbred.com/wheatspeak for future episodes.